Hello, everyone. Still fresh, not long till lunch, so hang in there. I'm here to talk about the last principle of travel retailing, conversion, or how to please the modern consumer. And I'm afraid I have to show you a really boring slide. While you try to decipher this, I'll give you a quick 30-second commercial about what we actually do. You might not be familiar with us. We are a payment and fraud management service provider. We are owned by Visa, hence that slide. We work with about 400,000 merchants globally, and we process payments and manage their fraud for them. We've been quite successful with the travel industry, working with almost 50 airlines, online travel agents, rail companies, so any sub-vertical of travel you could think of. I specifically work in new business for Cybersource, looking after travel. But don't worry, this is all I'm going to say about ourselves, so don't walk out of the room unless you want to get a good seat for lunch. But I've already put my towel down. I'm German, so you don't have a chance. I've put this slide in just to give a bit of background, but to be honest, I couldn't have planted more segues in the previous presentations if I had tried. Everything that I will cover in this presentation has already been touched on, from trust that Timothy was speaking about this morning, when it comes to payment security, to mobile, etc., etc. So maybe just to round things up, everybody knows how businesses have changed in the last few years in the way they sell to consumers. But we also know that the consumers have changed a lot. They expect to interact with you through various channels. They want these channels to be connected, so they want to give you the information again and again every time they interact with you. But at the same time, they want to feel like they can trust you with their information, that they don't have to worry about their data being stolen from you. And that's what this is about. I'll cover three different areas that sit within the realm of work that we do. It's payments themselves, it's payment security, and then fraud management. So I'll start off with payments. Okay, so apologize if I'm preaching to the choir here. This is an old hat. We've all heard it before. Different payment methods in different countries, but I think it's worth pointing it out again. I'm going to touch on two different countries specifically. There's a lot of different flavors of payments out there in the world, so if you want to know more, just speak to me afterwards. I'll start with Germany, obvious reasons. We know that Germans don't particularly like credit cards. So my parents, for example, have a credit card. They only have it because it came with their bank account, and you know what they do with it? They keep it in a safe. And the only time this credit card comes out is when they book a holiday, and only because I told them to, because of all the benefits that they get with it when they book with a credit card. They would much rather prefer to take another payment method, one of those offline ones like invoices, ELV. Don't try to pronounce it. I can't do it myself properly. Bank transfers, basically. Online payment methods in Germany are becoming a bit more popular. The likes of GiroPay, Sofortüberweisung, which are essentially the same thing, online banking, or also PayPal has been quite successful. But what we've noticed is that actually it was the airlines that have picked up on alternative payment methods more quickly than online travel agents or hotels, for example. So things are changing. If you leave Europe and you go to Latin America and you look at the market there, there's a study from Forrester that says about 62% of all e-commerce transactions in Latin America come from Brazil. If you want to be successful in Brazil, you have to offer local payment methods, because the study also says that 90% of the people in Brazil prefer paying with a method that they're familiar with, that is local to them. And 50% of the people there like to pay in installments. Now, for us, this sounds a bit odd, but it's very, very common there to book a holiday and pay this off in 8, 10, 12 installments. So what that means for you as a business, you sell that holiday, it limits your cash flow, and you might have a traveler that travels before they actually pay for what they purchased. As I said, there's much more out there to talk about, but because of time restrictions, I'm just going to touch on those two, but feel free to talk to me about it later. I think in summary what I'm trying to say is if you go into a different market, don't assume just because in Ireland or in the UK credit cards are very popular that this will automatically give you access to your target audience in the markets that you want to enter in. It's always worth checking with your payment service provider what kind of payment methods they would recommend. You don't have to offer all of them. Top 1 to 3 would probably be all right to reach most of the people you want to interact with. The way people interact with you, as you know, in the travel industry, probably more than anybody else, varies type of person they are. They contact you through the call center to book the holiday. They want to make changes online. Then they go to the airport and they want to be able to access all this information on their mobile phone. I'm pretty sure most of you in the room cover the majority of those channels that I've listed on there. And here's the first segue. Mobile is one thing that companies have been a little slow in catching up on. And what Frederick said earlier, just to clarify, when I say mobile, I mean mobile optimized websites or mobile applications, because it could mean a whole lot of other things. Just to throw a few more statistics out there, the IMRG Capgemini report from this year said that there has been a 304% increase of purchases via mobile in 2012 compared to 2011. That's massive. Just to throw a few more statistics in there, I went to the Travel Distribution Summit last week and picked up a few more statistics. One said that in Q1 of this year, 46% of all travel searches on Google happened on a mobile device. And one scary statistic, and I don't know, Kevin, if you remember, because I know you were there too, says that there's more people in the world have access to mobile phones than they have to electricity and water, and that's scary. So Kevin said also, if you haven't looked into optimizing your website for mobile, do it now. Well, actually you said tomorrow. I think you should do it now. Because it is true, you sit there in the evening on a Sunday, guilty, yes, in front of the TV, Thomas Cook, other brands available, comes on TV, and you start dreaming, and you want to look on a holiday. You want to look for holidays, and you take out your tablet or your smartphone, and you start searching, and maybe you even have the money to book it or the time. So it's something you should definitely consider and deal with as soon as you can. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier when I did the introduction was that the customers expect to interact with you via a lot of channels. They want these channels to be connected, but at the same time, they want their data to be secure with you. So there's a statistic, there's a study that we did in 2012 about payment security, and the results were that 63% of the respondents said that attacks on their systems to access confidential data are on the rise. 25% said it's becoming more and more frequent and more vigorous of people trying to access that data. And the reason is quite simple. That data is very valuable to a fraudster. They can use it for their own purposes to get from A to B for free. They can resell it on eBay or on, I think, Craigslist in the US. So it's easy for them to make money with this information. Unfortunately, it's not just outsiders that try to steal information. It could be third parties that you work with that have access to your database. It could be insiders even, people that work in your call center, people that have access to the databases where you store the information, like card numbers, etc. And the problem with the payment data is that it really affects all of your systems. It's from capture and transmission when you take the payment data in your call centers, on your websites or whichever other channels you cover, to the storage when it covers multiple databases. The call center staff might write it down on pieces of paper. Or you've got call recordings for your call center, and then obviously the back office as well. The finance team will have to reconcile. The fraud team will have to deal with manual review, with chargebacks, etc., etc. So it touches all of the systems. The reason why I bring this up and how it relates to conversion is that every business that processes payments has to become PCI compliant. And for those that don't know what PCI stands for, it's payment card industry, and the DSS is the data security standard. So you have to go through a whole heap of questions and self-assessment questionnaires and network scans and all that beautiful stuff to tick the boxes to become compliant. If you don't do this, it's very easy to get compromised. We all know what happened to Sony a few years ago. It does a lot of damage to your reputation. If people extract the data, you actually obliged, I think, changing the law that you have to report it within 24 hours. And if you're a big brand and you show up in the news as data has been stolen from such and such, it's not so good for your conversion. Luckily, there's payment service providers out there that offer services like hosted payment pages, where you can just get rid of all the data, the payment card data. And when you say hosted payment pages, doesn't mean that it's going to look boring and it's going to be on a different URL. This was a few years ago. Right now, it's possible to completely personalize and give the hosted payment page the look and feel of your own website. You can even have the URL the same as your own, so the customers wouldn't even know that they're somewhere else. What happens then, and I'm going to use that laser, is that once your customers decide, okay, I'm going to fly to the Maldives, great, exciting, booked a holiday, they enter their card data, and then the data bypasses your system and goes directly to your payment service provider. They then give you a token in exchange, and you can safely store the token in your systems. It cannot be re-engineered back to the card. So a fraudster, even if they get access to your tokens, they can't do anything with it. The beauty about this is that it doesn't actually affect any of your business as usual processes. You can still reconcile as normal. If somebody calls in and they want to add a bag to their flight, they can do this. You say, oh, you want to use the card ending in such and such. You just send the token back to the PSP, and it's all fine. It also helps with connecting all the different channels, because if they booked online and they've got the token and then they call on the call center to make a change to the booking, you can just reuse the same token that you already have for that specific card or customer. And then Frederick also spoke about one-click purchases. That's also perfectly possible if you have customers that come to you regularly. You can then, obviously they have to give their consent. You can then offer them next time, if they travel the same route again, do you want to use the card ending in 1234? They say yes, and you just send the token back to the PSP, and the transaction is processed as normal. Now, before you pick up your phone or send an email to your IT team saying, great, one click, let's do this, you may want to consider a few things, because it might not be for everyone. SNCF is a good example. They have a lot of commuters probably that use their trains frequently for the same routes. Clearly, you buy a monthly pass, a weekly pass. It's very easy. They probably have an account, a customer account that they store the customer information. So one click is perfect. Or frequent flyers that always fly, I don't know, let's say from London to Dublin regularly, perfect. But if you have once a year, twice a year holiday makers, they might first of all not trust you enough to give you their data to keep for the long term. Secondly, the card might have expired by the next time that you come, or they might have changed bank accounts, so it might not be worth it. But it would definitely help your conversion if you have frequent travelers, because it just makes life easier for them. Okay, moving on to fraud management. So, just to check if you're still listening or already thinking about lunch, question for the audience. What do you think the top e-commerce challenges are for a business when it comes to fraud management? So what are the main objectives for business when they deal with fraud management? Anyone? I really should have fed the answers into the audience.
Well, it's the regulatory framework favors the consumer, so very often the challenge is to actually get past the regulatory issues because it's so tough. You know, the chargeback goes to the credit card company, not to the consumer. The consumer gets off scot-free frequently.
Not one of the answers that we had for this, but maybe further down. Maybe further down.
The fraud is often not seen, that the e-commerce site might not see the fraud until the person has traveled.
Yeah, so too close to departure date. Yeah. So these are all things that are very, close to departure date is actually a very, very important one, because that's when most fraud happens, just before, because they think, oh, maybe they're not going to catch me by the time I get on the plane. Card not present, definitely. That's the main thing for fraud management when you take when you look at it in an online environment. Yeah.
The mismatch of the address with the origin.
Yeah, that gets into the very specific. I think I might not have phrased the question correctly here. Okay. Oh, sorry, that didn't work out, did it? Martin, you should have helped me out. You know the answers. Ah, dear. Okay. All right, so what I was trying to get to is that we do this fraud report in the UK and in our other regions every year. And last year was the first time that this one here didn't come out top. So it wasn't so much about losing revenue to fraud anymore. It was suddenly about, I don't want to turn away my good customers. I'm too scared to lose those. It's about the conversion and not blocking them, because it's all real time, the fraud checking these days. So before I go into what you can actually do with your fraud tool to increase the number of customers that you can accept, I want to touch on something that is very often forgotten about, especially in the travel industry, and it's loyalty programs. That's a big bugbear in the last few years, because businesses have become quite switched on in detecting fraud for their direct business on websites, call centers, etc., but they kind of forget about their frequent traveler programs. That took me ages. Let's see it again. Probably one and only time I actually get to fly a plane. Okay, so yeah, the thing with frequent traveler fraud is that it's almost a bit like a bank account. Miles are seen as a currency. So fraudsters trying to get through the direct route, going on the website directly and booking a flight or a holiday, is not so easy anymore. So they hack into frequent flyer accounts. We all know password 1, the most popular password. Okay, guilty. I used to use it myself previously. And what they do then is they take over this account. They use a stolen credit card to buy additional miles, or they buy directly, if there's enough miles on the account, they buy a flight, they use it for themselves, or they resell it on aforementioned websites. And the problem is that now you can't only buy travel anymore, but you can buy toasters, subscriptions, all that beautiful stuff. You can even get cash for it. It's really difficult if you don't monitor the account activity to detect whether this is a genuine customer that is trying to purchase a toaster. Okay, actually, to be honest, you probably would buy a plasma TV or something, not a toaster. Or if it's a fraudster. So it's important to use the fraud tool that you have also for your frequent traveler and put things in place like device fingerprinting. You may have, for those of you who use Facebook, if you log in from a different device, Facebook will tell you, "Ooh, is this a new device? Do you want to save this?" And they'll send you an email saying there was a login from device, blah, blah, blah. This is a very good tool to use for this as well, because it'll tell you suddenly somebody accessed this account, or suddenly there's a high activity going on with miles buying and redemption of miles. Okay, so another buzzword that has been around and has already been touched on is big data. And you all have a lot of data, and you can use this data to fine-tune your fraud management. And you have to define a good customer before you actually define a bad customer, which means look at the customer account history, what is normal for a particular customer that travels with you regularly. Look at the frequent traveler programs that you have, and look at the low-risk routes or the low-risk destinations that you offer, and define what is a good customer for you. Build rules around this. Also look at the sales channels. Obviously, it's a little less fraudulent. It's a little less risky to take a booking through a call center because you interact with the person than it is for a mobile phone when you can now book flights up until a few hours before departure, where somebody could literally sit at an airport, book it with a fraudulent credit card and go straight through. Most of the people don't even have the time to look at the manual reviews so quickly, and that person is already where they want to be. Again, build rules around this and make sure that you don't infringe your customer, your genuine customers on their journey through your website or any other channel. And then last but not least, segregate those transactions. Look at the difference between your domestic travelers, the ones that you're very familiar with, and your international travelers in markets that you're not so familiar with. Look at the payment methods they use. It's perfectly possible to build rules around payment methods, not just credit cards. It's possible to build rules around all sorts of things, especially with the emergence of device fingerprint, IP geolocation. It's not necessarily down to the payment methods or credit cards specifically. And then look at booking-specific information. What's unique about that specific booking? Is this normal for that customer? And that should pretty much give you a complete picture of what would be normal and what wouldn't be normal for the travelers that you usually deal with. And I think that gives you the chance to find what we at Cybersource call the profit optimization point. So the point where you cut out as many fraudsters as you can and let through as many genuine customers as you can. So it's not about getting your fraud to zero, because if you did that, you'd be flying with empty planes. It's quite easy to put stricter rules in place, but the deck chairs in the Maldives will be empty because nobody will be actually able to get there because it's too difficult to get through your process. So yeah, profit optimization point, that's the main thing. And that was it already. Just to sum up maybe, when it comes to customer conversion, look at different areas. Look at offering the payment methods that your customers are comfortable with in the markets that they are in. Look at mobile if you haven't already done so. Look at outsourcing your data to make sure that the payment data is secure, that you're not getting in trouble or into the news for all the wrong reasons. And then last but not least, look at how you can tweak your fraud management to reach that profit optimization point. That's it.
We do have a little bit of time for lunch, for some questions. So I've got one for you, which is, what's the likelihood that the fraudsters are really going to be able to break through things like Google Wallet and Passbook? I already saw that there's a hack been on Passbook where people have been able to make fraudulent bookings by creating this tokenization, creating fake tokenization. I've seen that that's something that's actually happened out there. Because all they had to do was to find one element or one door open,
Yeah. Well, not just with Google Wallets, but with any new customer that appears on the market, fraudsters are very likely to jump on that and test their systems. How stable are they? How easy is it to break through? Because very often a new business or a new venture, they're not that prepared for the open market. So fraudsters will try their luck. And if they get through at the beginning, then it's good for the business to put measures in place immediately. So I'm not surprised if they get through this at the beginning, but it's also an opportunity for Google and all the other wallets out there to fine-tune the way they operate and make sure that this won't happen once they take off and business through the wallets is even bigger.
Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? Please just raise your hand if you want. I have one more question for you. Bitcoin.
Okay.
So do you think people are actually going to start buying travel in Bitcoin?
Well, it's certainly developing into that direction.
We're using Bitcoin to buy products. I mean, it's very close.
As a currency, it fluctuates well.
Right. But if you have a product that is say, distressed merchandise, wouldn't you actually want to be able to be purchased using Bitcoin?
But as the merchant, you want to exit Bitcoin as quickly as possible.
Oh.
It's instability. Yeah. So really, the price of Bitcoin in a few minutes, it's quite a risky proposition.
But if I have a product that is going to be distressed or sunk product anyway, it's not going to appear anywhere, would it be useful if I could actually use that in the market to those people who acquired Bitcoin, is to find a way to convert that into cash?
Simply the fact that you're selling something through Bitcoin doesn't necessarily mean that it's a hidden price. That's just a conversion.
Right.
The point about distressed inventory is that the guy who walks up to the check-in desk at the airport and buys the full price ticket could arrive at any time in the next 10 minutes. So you still have to hide, the value if you don't want to cannibalize that channel. So I don't think Bitcoin's the answer to that. I'm very skeptical about it.
Does anybody else have an opinion on by the way, I just find Bitcoin fascinating. I bought one. I think at one time it's been worth 40,000 euros, another time it's been worth -2 euros, I think.
I'm not talking about Bitcoin. We've got a situation in our market where the banks are pressurizing the airlines to move to a 3D secure solution.
Mm-hmm.
So we're currently a customer of yours. We're using Cybersource for fraud detection.
Mm-hmm.
Before we pass the credit card details onto a third-party payment mechanism. So my question to you is, how have you seen other markets where the banks have been pressurizing, especially the travel suppliers, into 3D secure, and what has the impact been? And what solutions would you recommend?
Yeah. So 3D secure can be part of fraud management, but it's definitely not the remedy that will save you from all the trouble, because a fraudster that has done their homework can quite easily bypass it, to be fair. It's not accepted in all the markets as Visa or MasterCard would have probably hoped for. I think in Europe, the best country for acceptance for 3D secure is in the UK, 60%, but it's also as low as 10. On the positive side, the way 3D secure works is actually changing. So I think the card schemes realized, okay, this is a little bit cumbersome. It's not convenient for the merchant. I work in the card industry. I constantly forget my 3D secure password. I always have to reset it. Luckily, my bank account is with Barclays in the UK. And what they're doing right now in the UK with Visa is they're moving to a risk-based approach rather than a static password. So what happens is when you come to the checkout page and you make a booking or you purchase something, it'll redirect you to the 3D Secure website, but nothing happens. You just see a little timer that goes in the middle thinking, and then it redirects you back. What happens in the background is that Visa or the card issuer makes an assessment. Is this a normal transaction for my customer? Would they normally book a flight to Las Vegas at 2 o'clock in the morning, as an example? If yes, then they would just let it through. If not, then they would ask you for your password. And they seem to have seen very good success. More than, I think, the statistic about more than 95% of the transactions just go through. So I very, very rarely actually still get asked for my password. And they're trialing this in the UK, and I think it will probably roll out everywhere then, because they know the way they've implemented it. I know it's different in France. I think you get a text with a one-off password. It'll be different. In certain countries or for certain payment methods like Maestro, it's mandated. In India, it's mandated. You have to do it. American Express just started their safe key, also mandated. But I think it'll be changing because they know it's not the most easy.
Because the obstacles to then purchase is the people that are sorry, I'll go somewhere else, and they then typically call the help desk to try and get the transaction.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think it also depends. It's a little bit down to the card issuer to educate their customers. Because if it's mandated by your bank and they want you to use 3D Secure, at least with the banks that I have bank accounts with, they've bombarded me with information about 3D Secure and get your card registered. Not every bank does this. But in the UK, there was this watershed moment a few years ago where customers actually were concerned if they didn't get asked for their 3D Secure because they trusted the brand suddenly. But that's in the UK. In other countries, they just think it's a bother and they do what you do and go somewhere else.
All right. Unless anybody has a question, I guess everybody's hungry. Oh, John. You realize you are now keeping us from food.
Oh, dear.
Just with regard to the product where you take the consumer off the site to input the card details from a security perspective, when you talked earlier about frequent flyer programs, and you get with frequent flyer programs maybe co-branding with particular cards and so on. How do you resolve the issue of crediting frequent flyer back to the consumer's account if they've gone off site and we don't know what credit card they're using?
Well, if we as Cybersource are the payment service provider, when they do this crediting, then we'd know what kind of card they're using. Because the redirection happens to us, to our service, so we know what card they use.
But does the card come back to the merchant so that the merchant knows what
card
it is?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
You get a response back from any of the payment service providers out there that will tell you what card was used, was 3D Secure invoked, what was the answer. God, I'm not technical, but yeah, of course you get an authorization report back.
Right. Nadja, thank you very, very much.
No problem.